Hey everyone, I'm going to do a video now on liquid foundations, liquid water-based foundations, oil-based foundations, as opposed to the cream foundations that I touched on in the last video. So there are a good few different types of liquid foundations, as in finishes and stuff. You can go from anything from like a really sheer kind of finish like the MAC Face and Body, or even like a tinted moisturizer would still be roughly in the same category, up to like a full coverage thicker foundation like the Revlon Color Stay, or like the MAC Studio Fix, which isn't maybe quite as thick as the oil free Color Stay, but there's everything in between then as well. So it's up to you kind of what thickness or what coverage you want from a foundation. Now on top of that, it deals with different skin types as well. So I mean, a good example is like the Revlon Color Stay, where they do one for normal to dry skins and then one for combination to oily skins. So this generally involves one product with oil and one product which is oil free, which would be more water based, or maybe silicone based or gel based. It really does vary. So I'll start off with the water-based ones. MAC Face and Body is a water-based foundation, in that it gives, immediate hydration. It's good for dry skins. Less coverage, definitely. Sometimes you can get some water ones that have more pigment in it, but the Face and Body is quite very sheer finish. Then you could go for like a gel-based foundation, which, what would be a good example? The Makeup Forever Face and Body actually is more gel-based. And that's it's still quite sheer, but it does give a bit more coverage than the MAC Face and Body. Another gel-based foundation would be the MAC Sculpt foundation, Studio Sculpt, but that's a much heavier consistency and coverage than you would get from the Makeup Forever Face and Body. So again, even though they are gel based, they'll still vary in coverage. Anyone on the counter, if you're buying it from a counter, any of the girls there or any of the guys there will be able to tell you what coverage is and match up to your needs. Besides that, if you're getting it from a pharmacy, unfortunately, a lot of them don't go into detail on the back of bottles, so you might have to do some like homework or check up online, or try and find out as much from anywhere else as you can before buying it, because sometimes it's just not readily available, this information, in pharmacies. Okay, so then another type you could get would be like a silicone based foundation, like the Studio Fix by MAC has silicone in it, which allows for a nice application of foundation, and usually has slightly heavier coverage. Like a lot of airbrush foundations are silicone based as well, and that is like pure pigment. There's a lot of color in that, and it gives a lot of coverage without being really thick or heavy. So then you can have obviously your oil based foundations. Now a lot of foundations will say they're oil free when they actually have a lot of natural oils in it, but by saying oil free, it's mineral oil that they're talking about. So there is a big difference between that. It's something you have to look out for. Now I know this is a lot of talking here, but there is just a lot of difference between foundations and stuff. So generally for skin types, I'll run through the different skin types quickly. You have your drier skins. You'd be more suited to an oil based foundation, which is going to obviously give you oil if that's what you're if that's what you are lacking. You could go for you could think you have dry skin and just have dehydrated skin, which maybe you'd be more you'd benefit more from having a water-based foundation, so that you actually get some hydration. It's important to moisturize well underneath foundations when you do have dry skin. Or you could use like a silicone-based concealer or primer or something like that, which will also help with the slip and slide of the foundation over your skin, because if you have quite dry, dehydrated, flaky skin, it'll show up through the foundation and it doesn't look good. So you do have to prepare your skin well, generally, if you've got very dry skin. If you have normal skin, to be honest, you're lucky. You can get away with most. It depends on what kind of finish you want, what kind of coverage you want. You can pretty much take any kind of foundation, so that's when you're lucky, when you have that kind of skin type. Then, so if you have combination skin, that can be more tricky, because you could be like me where my face still produces oil in areas. Generally I'm more normal around the cheeks and maybe forehead, but because of the weather and central heating and stuff lately, I am extremely dehydrated around in areas where, to the point where my skin is flaking off. So I mean, I suppose that can happen to everyone, but it can be tricky to match up foundation for the skin type. So usually you'll have to do something like, for me, when my skin is a bit more normal and happy, I usually use some kind of like mattifying primer down the center of my face where I do produce oil, and then I can just use kind of foundation everywhere, and that helps kind of balance it out. Or if I am drier here, I'll try and use maybe a silicone primer here, use a richer moisturizer in these areas, not down the center, and then put the foundation everywhere. So you will have to play around with it a bit more if you have combination skin. And then with oily skin, you're going to try and use drier foundations. So you could use something like the Studio Fix by MAC, which is a matte foundation. It's matte foundations generally that you're after if you have very oily skin, because if you use kind of natural satin dewy finishes, it doesn't really do much for you if you already have quite a lot of shine in your skin. So something like the Studio Fix has silica in it, or some other kind of powder that will help absorb oil. You could go for like the Studio Fix powder, which is just powder foundation. Something like that will work quite well. Mousse foundations are quite dry, which are quite good as well, and gel foundations are quite good for oily skin, or even water-based foundations kind of work very well depending on how oily your skin is. So that's pretty much the different types, etc. And now I'll just do a demo on my own skin. I'm going to be using the MAC Face and Body because it is a water-based foundation and it will inject a bit of moisture into my skin as it's so dry at the moment, or dehydrated more than anything else. So one thing about liquid foundations is a lot of the time, I'd say like 90% of the time, you won't get a 100% perfect match. That doesn't even make sense at all, does it? But you know what I mean. It's hard to get a perfect match because of, you know, differences in skin tones and stuff. You'll usually get a match that is really, really similar to your skin tone, or that matches fairly well, but it won't be 100%. So I always say it's a good thing to have a winter foundation and a summer foundation. Now your winter foundation will be the lightest you ever go. Summer foundation will be the darkest you ever go, and in between, as long as you're somewhere in between that spectrum, you can mix and match. So for me, I match up on the back of my hand. Now you can use a palette if you want, if you are doing this kind of mixing, but generally even on clients I do use the back of my hand as long as they're happy for me to use it and it's been sanitized. You can get like something like this. It's just an artist's palette. This was 99¢ in Eason's in Ireland. You can go to art stores and get palettes, but you're going to pay a lot more for the same thing. So you don't need to get anything that's any more expensive, because there's just no need. As long as you can sanitize it properly, just 99% alcohol, same thing I use on my brushes is what I use for that. So for this foundation, it's the liquid based foundation, very, very watery. I'm going to use one of these brushes, which is like the MAC 188, but this is a dupe for the 187, the smaller version by LetzMakeup, and it is a dual fibre brush. The reason I'm using this one is when it comes to liquid foundations, the more water-based ones, like the Face and Body, they tend to be very runny. So the more traditional foundation brush I find isn't much good on anything that runny, and then a wedge like a sponge like this is going to absorb too much product, and also it's too runny for your fingers generally. So this is my favourite product. Now you can use a sponge if you want, but it will absorb a lot of product when there is a lot of water in it. So this is my favourite brush to use. A lot of different brands do it. This is the LetzMakeup, you can do it in MAC. I know Encore on YouTube as well, his makeup brand makes a lot of these brushes, so they're not hard to get. They last a long time, but they give such a nice finish. So I just use that to buff it in, I wouldn't even bother just stippling with this kind of foundation because it doesn't give enough coverage. And you can see it gives a sheen to my skin, which is kind of what I want just while it's so dry. Now, if I'm using a thicker foundation like the Studio Fix Fluid or the Revlon Cover Stay, you can get away easily with using a sponge or the more traditional brush. Use them dry if you want a thicker coverage. You can even use your fingers with that because it's not going to just drop and fall and drip everywhere like it would with the more water-based ones. And you can wet or dampen your sponge or brush. You can use this as well if you want to shear them down a bit. So they're pretty much the same tools that you'd use for all foundation. It just depends on the finish you're looking for. Now with this foundation I can bring it down onto my neck as it is a body foundation as well, and it is fairly transfer proof. Now, so there you go. It hasn't given me the greatest coverage in the world. It's still quite natural, but that's all I'm looking for the moment. Okay, so I want to quickly talk about hygiene when it comes to liquid foundations. Like I said, you can use a palette for application. That way, and as long as it's sanitized, always sanitize your surfaces, guys, whether it's your hand or your palettes, especially if you're working on other people. So you can use a palette like this. Never dip into the actual container. Like with these ones that have open lids, you know the way some people, I mean, it's tempting. I mean, you can just pop it in there. Try not to, because that's just introducing unneeded and definitely unnecessary germs into your product. And especially water-based products, germs just thrive in water-based products. So you know, like bacteria, it's going to multiply and really thrive in any product that has a lot of water in it. So be aware of that. Look out for change in smell, change in texture, in colour, if the foundation separates and stuff even after shaking. I mean, a lot of the products will say, like for the MAC Face and Body, it's 24 months, but you still have to be careful when it comes to water based products in general. So do keep an eye on them. I've so many times I've had to throw away product that had gone off well before it was supposed to. But it's just something you have to be vigilant of, especially if you have a professional kit and you're using it on clients. The drier foundations, or maybe the foundations that don't have water in them, have more oil, they're a bit safer. They generally do not have as, what's the word, it's supposedly as desirable an environment as for the bacteria as the water ones. The dry powder foundations will last you for so long, so they're fine. What else? Oh yeah, one thing you have to be aware of as well when it comes to foundations is whether it has sunblock in it. This is very important during the summer, obviously, or if you're on holiday in a hot country, because I know you can get sunblock separately, like in primers and just normal sunblock, but it's just way handier if you have it in the actual foundation. Now, like something like Select SPF 15, your Max Select, a lot of products do have SPF in it, and another thing you have to be careful of when it comes to the SPF is whether it contains titanium dioxide, zinc oxide, because if it comes to photography, SPF, flash, because these are naturally occurring sunblocks, but the problem is when it comes to like photography, flash photography, it will cause a glare, and it generally make your face look 2 to 3, 4 whatever shades lighter than the rest of your body. So this is going to be a problem for weddings, for photo shoots, etc. So I mean, a good example of this is the Makeup Forever HD foundation. I used to work with the brand, and a lot of brides would come in looking for it. Now, I'd kind of say to them, be careful, it will cause a glare. They wouldn't listen because, you know, there was so much hype around it when it first came out, and they just went ahead and used it. And I had at least 2 brides coming in saying that they were really unhappy with the photographs. Wrong colour was picked for them, and, you know, I was reiterating the fact that I told them not to use it. It wasn't the wrong shade, it was the photography. So it is something you have to be aware of. A good example of this is the MAC Studio Fix powder has it in it, but not in the actual fluid. But it's just something you have to look through the ingredients, unfortunately, if you are thinking about photography when it comes to these things. I know I'm chopping and changing a lot, but one thing I forgot to say about hygiene as well is try and be aware of the how it's dispensed. Now, something like this is perfect. It's the pump that can be bought from MAC to go along with their foundations. Now, the MAC foundations come like this, with the more traditional, just normal opening. But the problem here is that a lot of people tend to dip straight into here, which is going to, you're going to introduce a lot of unnecessary bacteria and germs, and it's going to make your foundation go off way quicker than it should. But you can get a pump like this, which is so much more hygienic. You've less wastage. This is the mineralized one. It comes with this pump, which is handy as well, or you can get the ones in squeezy tubes, so that's another thing to look out for. And then I think that's pretty much it when it comes to liquid foundations. Now, I know I've blabbed on an awful lot about it, but there is an awful lot to do to say when it comes to foundations. So I will be doing another video on maybe mousse, and just a shorter video, because I've touched so much on this video and in the cream video, but a shorter video on maybe gel and mousse foundations. There are other drier foundations, or the powder foundation. But also I'm going to do a video on matching foundations, because hands down the most asked question working on counter is, can you match my skin tone to foundation? People don't know what their skin types are, they don't know what their predominant skin tone is, whether the pink or yellow base, etc. So I think this is something kind of that will come in handy. Now, I can't match foundation for anyone without seeing them in person, but I can still give as good a guideline as I can possibly do without looking at anyone. So I hope this was helpful and that it wasn't too ridiculously boring, but I'll talk to you again really soon, guys, and thanks for watching. Bye.